Hello everyone, and welcome to one of our leftover inspiration recipes. Today we'll be making a vegetable mash gnocchi. We'll be making all three variations of this recipe in the video today, using potatoes for a more traditional style gnocchi and a couple different options with some carrot and turnip. You'll also need flour, eggs, salt and pepper of course, and a bit of canola oil, as well as a small pot to start boiling our vegetables in. Now this step isn't required. The whole point of this is to be an option for something left over. So if you have some leftover mash or overcooked vegetables, those can easily work for this recipe. If you are making the mash, just let your veggies boil until they are tender and mashable. Once you have your mash ready, let it cool down a little bit before we add our eggs so we don't cook them. As you can see here, the steam has stopped, so I'm going to add my eggs. If you've never separated eggs before, you crack it in half as nicely as you can and just pass it back and forth between each shell until the majority of the whites are gone. You can also just crack it into a bowl and scoop the yolk out if you're down to get your hands dirty. Once our eggs are in, we're going to whisk it up to fully incorporate the egg into our mash before we add the flour. Start by sprinkling the flour over top and cut it into your mash by making crisscross cuts in your soon-to-be dough to incorporate the flour without overmixing. Once we have the majority of our flour cut into the mix, scrape around the side of the bowl and fold your dough over and keep on mixing until your flour is fully incorporated. You want it to resemble Play-Doh almost. In this first clip here, I didn't add the proper amount of flour, and even though I thought my dough was the right texture, it wasn't, and they turned out a bit too soft. You'll see later once they're put beside the carrot and the turnip ones. Start by throwing down some flour and slapping your dough down. Using a knife, spatula, or anything flat, cut off a quarter-sized chunk of your dough, or if you've made less than I have here, you can go by halves and roll the dough out into a long log. This recipe would be great to make with kids. They can get their hands in there and help out with supper. Once you've rolled it into a nice long snake shape, use a butter knife to cut them into bite-sized pieces and place them on a floured baking tray, plate, or anything flat, really. Repeat these steps until you've turned all your dough into little bite-sized gnocchis. The next step is blanching, so throw a pot on to boil, preferably before you start putting the dough together, and season it with salt. Any boiling water should be salted until it tastes like the ocean, whether for pasta, boiling potatoes, or vegetables. You want to season with every step of your cooking. We're going to throw these gnocchi in a few at a time, making sure to not overcrowd the pot. This will cause the water to cool down and your gnocchi won't cook as fast or as consistently, and consistency is key when it comes to cooking. Once your gnocchi are swimming away, you want to wait until they start to float, then haul them out of there and add in your next batch. Through the magic of film, I've made and blanched the other two flavors of the gnocchi off camera, and we're going to go into the next step, which is searing the gnocchi, which is pretty much the last step. You want them to cool off a bit before you start this step. You can pop them into the fridge or even outside for a minute if it's cold out and the weather is nice. You just don't want them going into the pan while they're still steaming hot. Start by heating your pan over medium-high heat until it's hot. Then we're going to add in about a tablespoon of oil and let that get super hot too. A visual cue of that is that the oil will look thinner and will start to have little heat lines through it if you really stare at it. This is the key to getting a good sear on whatever you're searing. A hot pan first, then hot oil. When your oil is hot, throw in a few of your gnocchi, making sure again to not overcrowd your pan. Just like the boiling water, this will cause your pan's heat to drop and it'll steam the item rather than searing it, also causing it to stick. If you're a perpetual stick to the pan-er, try this trick next time and you should have no sticking. To tell that they're seared on the first side, give a peek at the bottom side edge of the gnocchi. You should be able to see it getting golden brown without having to lift it up. Once they all seem to have that little golden brown crust to them, you should be able to give your pan a little shake and they'll start moving around. This is time to start flipping. Some of your gnocchi might need a little help coming loose, but that's okay. You can easily flip these with a spatula or spoon one by one, or do a fancy chef flip like I do. Now, you want to let the other side of the gnocchi get the same golden brown crispy edge. I always like to finish gnocchi with a little butter or margarine in the pan just before I take it off the heat and let it get foamy and coat all the gnocchi. You can toss in some fresh or dry herbs at this point. Make sure to season your gnocchi with salt and pepper if you like, and if straight up isn't your style, toss these little guys in some pesto or with some tomato sauce and Parmesan or a cheesy cream sauce. You could throw anything on these and they would be so good. And It's a great way to sneak in some extra vegetables. Enjoy!